All right. As people are joining, I'm going to quickly just get us started. I'm Annette Venford. I'm one of the student researchers at the Bridge Lab. And today's webinar is going to be about managing parent burnout in rare genetic populations. So we'll kind of slowly get started as people continue to file in. As a quick kind of reminder, the event will be recorded for the lecture portion, but not the Q&A. And it's going to last exactly 1 hour. We're going to end the discussion at 2. Um, if you have questions during, you can always send them in the chat, and then we'll get to them in the Q&A after the lecture portion. And again, for the agenda, we're gonna quickly do some housekeeping, and then Dr. Phil Fisher is going to talk about current data regarding parent burnout using data from the Rapid Survey from the Stanford Center on Early Childhood. And then afterwards, we're gonna jump to Dr. Al Atkins, who's going to talk about tools for managing parent burnout, and then the Q&A. So quickly, Bridge Lab from Stanford is hosting the webinar. We study the genetic basis of a lot of these rosopathies, and and seeing how they transform and translate to certain behaviors. And for today's speakers, we have Dr. Phil Fisher, who is on the team who led the Rapid Survey from the Stanford Center on Early Childhood. And then we also have Dr. Al Atkins from the Stanford Parenting Center. And he also runs a really cool podcast called Let's Get Psyched that you guys all should check out. So we're going to jump to Phil.
All right. Well, again, let me just echo Annetta and say thanks everybody for joining us. Really excited to share some information with you over the course of the next few minutes or so. In particular, what I'm going to be talking about is data that we have been gathering from parents of young children. And this is a kind of a general population survey, but it's intended to be representative of the US population. And as a result, it's quite diverse, not only in terms of geography, income, race, and ethnicity, but also in terms of the representative nature of plenty of families with children with special health care needs. So hopefully the information I'll be sharing will be useful to you and kind of resonate with your own experiences. Next slide, please. So yes, the rapid survey started originally in the spring of 2020. As we probably all remember, this was the time when the pandemic was kind of spreading across the world and lots of things were getting shut down. Our team, which was based in a university setting and had been doing research for many years, but oftentimes in the context of like having people come into our laboratory to collect data, found ourselves, like a lot of other people, idled and not sure what we could do in order to really meet the moment. And so we decided that we would start a survey to share with the voices of young people. And then you can just go back to the prior slide and I'll tell you when to advance them. Yeah. We started gathering data from families across the country. The idea in designing the survey was to have a large number of families to participate, to really share their voices with us through both quantitative and open-ended questions about what was going on. And originally we did the survey on a on a weekly basis, and subsequently we expanded it, and now it's a monthly survey. It takes about 15 minutes to complete online. It's available in English or Spanish, as well as more recently a number of other languages. And as you can see, over time, in the last 5 years plus, we've gotten data from over 23,000 parents. And we also do a survey of people in the early care and education workforce to find out what's going on with them. Next slide, please. So we ask a lot of different types of questions in the rapid survey. Perhaps some of the most relevant are how parents perceive their children are doing in terms of just their emotional kind of state, how parents are doing in areas like stress, depression, anxiety, loneliness, as well as kind of how families are doing overall. We also have focused a lot on this area of material hardship, which is really families' ability to pay for basic needs on a monthly basis, things like food and housing and utilities. And then we also ask about access to and utilization of childcare services and access and utilization of healthcare services. Next slide, please. So over the course of the survey, we've heard from over 3,000 parents who report that their child has special healthcare needs. And that's a self-report. So if a parent identifies that this is the case, then we would put them into this category. Needless to say, that's a very broad range of conditions or circumstances that people might be under. And the rates are slightly lower compared to at least some of the data that's available around the proportion of families in our survey versus the overall US population who have a child with special needs. But generally speaking, posted on what the experiences of families during the pandemic were who have children with special needs. And this is one example of a paper that came out in 2021 on this topic. If you could go to the next slide. What we have learned and have really gotten a lot of feedback from families and other providers of children with special needs is that really the pandemic was a very challenging event, that it led to challenges with people's economic circumstances. It also led to high rates of distress for both parents and children and difficulties in those areas around healthcare and childcare consistently during the pandemic. And one of the things that I think was really powerful to our team as we were putting out these fact sheets, which you can find on the Rapid Survey website. I'll post that in the chat once we're a little bit further along in this presentation, is really that parents felt very isolated and that hearing that other families with a child with special health care needs were experiencing the same thing at least made them feel like they were a little bit less alone. Next slide, please. In particular, this list here can show you some of the areas that we heard from during the pandemic were special challenges for families with children who have special healthcare needs, educational and other kind of special needs services were very hard to access because a lot of those historically have been in person, harder to deliver than to the general population over telehealth and other kinds of formats. Dealing with medical and legal issues is also exceedingly difficult. And then you see the list going down of a variety of other things that people were reporting. And you have a nice quote there on the right that just shows that there were a lot of challenges, also some bright spots, at least for this parent, in terms of continuing to have insurance to pay for services, but still having a lot of financial burden themselves. Next slide. So that was really a snapshot of the pandemic, but the pandemic's kind of in our rear view right now. And so the question is, what do we know about the experiences that families have been having for the period of time since the pandemic? And so let me just show you sort of what we've been finding. First, what I'll do in showing this series of slides is show you what our overall survey population is saying is going on. And then I'll split the data into families with a child with special needs and those without. This slide in and of itself has gotten a lot of attention in the media, and rightly so. What it shows is that in general, families with young children, a very large proportion, perhaps a surprising proportion of families with in general, with a young child, struggle on a monthly basis to make ends meet. So the rates at the outset of the pandemic were about 40%. You can see a really interesting dip in the proportion of households that were having difficulty paying for basic needs. That was during the period of time when the pandemic relief policies, including the child tax credit, were in place, and it really cut this financial hardship down considerably. But when those policies ended in the spring and summer of 2022, you can see the rates jump back up again and have consistently been about 1 in 3 families actually until the last couple of months. And for both June and July, we now see half of the families that take our survey, and this is designed to be representative of the whole population, are struggling to make ends meet on a monthly basis. So very concerning. Next slide. Here, what you see is what it looks like when you split the sample by families with a child with a disability versus not. And what you can see is that consistently, the rates of economic hardship have been about double for families with a special needs child from the outset of the pandemic and continuing on across time. Next slide, please. You can see now this slide shows the aggregate of parental distress reported across time. This is on a scale of 1 to 100. And what you can see is that the rates were very high at the outset of the pandemic and have gradually come down, I think, as people have sort of adjusted to the uncertainty of life day to day. But again, if you split the sample into those with special needs and those without, next slide, please, you can see that the rates of distress among parents with a child with a disability have again been significantly higher consistently across time relative to those without. Next slide. Same is true for looking at children's distress levels. This is a composite of reports by parents of children being either angry or defiant, sort of acting out versus really worried and anxious. And overall, you can see that the rates have been a little bit more stable, but come down consistently across the pandemic. But if you split the sample into those with and without a disability, you can see the same trend that I described previously. Next slide, please. So here you see, at least in terms of this one measure of fearfulness and fussiness, consistently higher rates for those for children with a disability relative to those without. Next slide. Um, this is a particularly important slide, especially for the context of this presentation. What we've seen during the context of the pandemic was that there were a lot of missed well child visits. After the pandemic waned, you can see a much smaller proportion, generally in the single digits of the proportion of families reporting missing a well child visit. But again, if you split that into the two groups of families, same kind of pattern emerges. So next slide, please, where you can see that overall across time, families where there's a child with special healthcare needs typically report missing more well child visits. This is especially true as children get older, so 3, 4, 5 years old. But well child visits are a particularly important source of both screening and documenting ongoing issues and referral to additional services. So it's concerning to us that there are so many missed visits relative to the general population for families where there's a child with a disability. And then I believe this is the last slide that reports data. This has to do with missing routine vaccination visits. Again, the numbers are very low after the pandemic ended. But if you split this into the two subgroups, which we'll see on the next slide, then you can see that the rates are consistently higher across time, with the exception of a few time points in the context of children with a disability. So the overall picture that this tells us is really, I want to emphasize, is about the context in which families where there's a child with special needs, special healthcare needs, are dealing with day-to-day life, where the challenges that they're facing in terms of their economic circumstances and the challenges that they're facing in terms of accessing services are quite prevalent, higher than what we see in the general population, and are associated with higher rates of both adult and child distress. I mentioned as I was starting to talk about the structure of the survey that we also collect open-ended question responses, not just these kind of yes/no questions. And so I'm going to show you now a couple of slides that will really elevate the voices of parents who've responded to our survey who have children with special healthcare needs. I'll read a few of these and leave the rest for you to read on your own. My child receives early intervention services for speech therapy, and I'm concerned that political changes will impact the availability of these highly necessary services for him and children like him. And then another parent says, continuous fluctuations in what we are paid for disability is different every month, and there's no way to predict what it'll be. We've consistently heard across all families taking our survey that really the uncertainty and unpredictability of the times we're living in, not just during the pandemic, but since then, are really concerning. You see one parent talking about feeling like they're going through it alone, and then you see just the last quote, kind of all of the different challenges that these parents are reporting facing in the context of trying to support their child. On the flip side of that, we've also asked what are the things that are helping the most, and you can see the responses to that in the next slide. So you can see that, for example, being on Medicaid, or in California, it's called Medi-Cal, is really a huge help financially because of the cost of the additional services and supports that are needed. This kind of subsidy or supplemental funding is really, really critical for many of the parents that have taken our survey. One parent talks about the importance of having a childcare provider in their life to really help to support them with the work that they're doing raising their child. Parent support groups and other kinds of supports are really critical. And I'll just leave you with this, that has been really a consistent theme throughout the survey from all parents, and in particular in the subgroup of parents with a child with special healthcare needs, which is that being able to maintain consistent routines and being able to have the support of others to be able to do so is probably the thing that has the greatest effect on leading to distress levels being decreased, even in the context of the economic and financial challenges that a lot of families with young children in this country are facing. So, with that, I'm going to pass the baton to our other speaker, Al, who will really be giving some suggestions about some ways beyond what I just said, some really practical ways to help support yourselves and your children. Over to you, Al.
Thank you. Um, so a lot of the things outlined lead to really like having the odds stacked against us for burnout. Next slide. So first off, really appreciate you being with us and also what you're doing. You're doing a hard thing and you're doing it well and you're making time to be curious and learn. These are highly varied conditions, and even within each condition, there's a varied presentation, so not everything will apply to you. Take what works, leave what doesn't, but don't knock it till you try it. And I would say try it 3 times. Really give these things a chance because I've kind of distilled the ones that really work well. They're going to be seeds, so you might hear it now, you might hear it again later. I suggest you take notes because, like I said, these are seeds, and so I can't teach everything about these things, but a lot of the things I've put here are helpful concepts that you can look deeper into. Um, and as I'm talking, look for one thing that you're going to change today. Okay. So we're going to treat burnout like it's an eventuality. And even if it never happens, the great thing is that preparing for burnout is just making our life better. So we can do it regardless. Um, Prepare before you feel desperate, before you have a crisis. And the goal here is we want to interrupt stress. Stress is helpful in the short term, but it becomes toxic when it's uninterrupted for long periods. So we're going to try to create small interruptions of joy and silliness and lightness to make all of this doable. So we want to interrupt that stress with breaks. We want to be able to really increase our self-awareness, recognizing when we need a break and prioritize that break, even if it seems incredibly difficult because there's a screaming child in front of us. We're going to also build proactive breaks, some of which may happen, some of which may not, depending on what's going on at home. And structured recurring support moments that are harder to let go of, that are really like a friend's coming to the house, we're going for a walk, and we do this once a week, so I don't have to think about having to plan it anew every time. Take what you can get in terms of a break, even if it's a 30-second break or a 10-second break. Think of that as a break and use it. Okay. So we want to be able to seek outside perspectives because things can start to get unhealthy and inaccurate in terms of our self-talk if we don't have kind of the light of day shining. So therapy is the gold standard. A therapist is paid to kind of see things from the outside and reflect certain things back on you, but it's not the only way to do it. If cost or time prevents therapy, we can be vulnerable and relate deeply to our friends and family. And even if we have therapy, it doesn't replace having a lifelong through line of actually sharing ourselves with our friends and family and not just saving the hard parts for therapy. We really want to be able to show the darkness to our friends and families so they can show us that we're a lovable, valuable person regardless and kind of find commiseration in maybe the areas they share. And body doubling is just a go back just for 1 second. Um, Body doubling is kind of a fun new thing that's coming out online. There's websites like FocusMate and Flow Club that allow you to log on, see another person. They tell you what they're going to do. You tell them what you're going to do, and it just kind of has another person there for accountability and for strength as you're going through your day. So you could say, "Oh, I'm going to be cleaning the house and taking care of my kiddo," and they're saying, "I'm going to be doing my taxes," and you just kind of do it together. And it's been shown that people perform better and also have higher morale who are doing this. Okay, so we want to ask for help. A lot of community building in the US individual culture. Oh, nice. Thank you, Slauson, for sharing that. That's awesome. Um, we have this individualistic culture where we don't ask for help. We're much more willing to give help. And so being willing to ask for help often is a meaningful step in building community around you. So push yourself to ask your help for help, even if you don't think the help will be helpful. It might take a few times having a friend come over and kind of see how you do things, or you getting comfortable with like asking for the things you need for it to actually be helpful. But your friends will surprise you. They might bring new ideas. They might show you that things can be easier than you're making them. And by them coming over and trying to help, even if it doesn't actually do much, they've now seen your life in a deeper way. And for those who maybe their friends don't have kids with disabilities, they're able to kind of understand you in a more meaningful way when y'all chat. Um, Equally important is setting boundaries and saying no to maybe things that you used to do before things got busier. So, okay, two things to be aware of when we're doing skillful parenting. One is called vulnerable child syndrome. So, families who've had trauma-like experiences or traumatic experiences in the medical system can often see their child as more vulnerable than they are in the current moment based on past medical history. And they can start to kind of allow their child to shape their world through tantrums and not wanting to do things. And they start to accommodate increasingly. And that can lead to what's called an identified patient dynamic, where one child is medicalized, lots of things are done for them that maybe they could do for themselves, and this creates a harder time for the parent, and it creates a power dynamic that can worsen over time. So, to start to combat some of this stuff from or keep it from forming in the first place, we want to allot attention when the child is showing independent behavior, maturity, and when things are calm. Often, when things are calm, the child's getting no attention because the child's not asking for attention. And so, in some kind of a sort of insidious way, we can learn that, oh, I actually get the most attention when I throw a tantrum or when I do something silly but also annoying. And so we want to make sure to be gifting lots of warmth and attention when the child is just being not super loud but noticeably good. And then at times when things are bad, when there's a tantrum acting out, hey, I love you, I care about you, but I'm going to go ahead and go to the kitchen and just kind of do my own thing until you can calm down and have a safe voice and body and withdraw the attention. We're allowing them to calm down and we're allowing them to not be rewarded for the behaviors we don't want. So push yourself to leave your child alone for your own sake, even if it's just 5 feet away or the next room. Um, this gives you time for those tiny little breaks that we talked about. I know that's easier said than done, but like I said, try it. Um, Learn PCIT and PMT principles. So PCIT is parent-child interaction training or therapy, and it's sort of the younger kid version, and PMT is for slightly older kids parent management training. These are principles for how to use your attention and love wisely in a way that doesn't reinforce behaviors we don't want. And calmly deliver pre planned, time limited consequences with an off ramp. So, an off ramp means I give you a choice. If you don't like the consequence and your plan is to dysregulate and break the window, I preempt that and I say, no Xbox for 24 hours. However, if you really hate that consequence, you can do all of the dishes and clean the floors. And then as soon as you finish that, you can get it back. And now they have a choice instead of thinking of their own choice, which is, I hate all of this and I'm running away, locking myself in the closet. We want the consequences to be time limited because kids have a very short time before they become nihilistic and say, well, it's not worth it anyway, forget about it. We want to use screen time wisely. It's unrealistic that we're never going to have screen time, and it's okay to have screen time as the babysitter sometimes. But we can be involved in which screen time choices our children are making and offer them two acceptable choices. Movies have been shown to be very helpful for mental health of youth. Yes, we can talk about that. I'll get to that later on. Thanks for the question. You know what, brief, I'll just answer it right now. So, Focus Mate, you can Google that. And I haven't tried this one, but Flow Club, I've heard good things about too. Okay, so we want to be open with siblings about what's going on. Um, and we can actually ask them to help. So by them having to sort of contribute, they can start to grasp the meaning in the care for the more disabled child. And then in turn, we're going to take a specific amount of dedicated time each day that we devote exclusively to the sibling who might be sidelined otherwise due to them having less severe medical stuff. Use family therapy to reduce hidden resentment. And if you can't use family therapy because of cost or time, we're going to go over some things that you can do on your own. So, couples health, and most of this applies to whole families and other types of units as well. Um, so, share decision making and labor. Um, there's so many people right now reading the book How Not to Hate Your Husband After Having Children. Um, there's an avoidance that we see in kind of typical heterosexual relationships. And the traditional division of labor really breaks down when it comes to raising a disabled child. Don't go build a shed while your wife is caring for the child. We don't need a shed right now. What we need is people to be present with the difficult moments. Seek couples therapy to improve communication and connection. And if time or money doesn't allow, we're going to go over some Gottman principles that you can use. So John and Julie Gottman are a couple who have like a kind of funny fake Airbnb type thing where they've studied people. It's like you can come spend time at this weekend retreat, but we're going to study you and record you, and they look at what leads to good outcomes in couples. So the four horsemen are these four criticisms, or sorry, these four behaviors: criticisms, contempt, defensiveness, and stonewalling that they've identified lead to an astoundingly high predictability of divorce. Um, so for criticism, instead of criticizing, we want to complain. Complaining is where we use I statements instead of you statements. We're not pointing fingers. We're just saying something like, I felt really bad this morning after our interaction. And you're kind of exploring that with more curiosity. Instead of contempt, we want to try to be strengths based. Instead of being defensive, we want to try to take responsibility and give ourselves a moment before we respond to kind of acknowledge the truth in what someone is saying, even if it feels harsh. Stonewalling is a big one to avoid. That's basically just shutting the other person out. But read more about this stuff. It's great. There's a 5-to-1 golden ratio for basically all human relationships of 5 positive things to 1 negative. It's really hard that we need in order to kind of have a healthy relationship. It's really hard to increase positives because positive get tiring after a while. 3 compliments doesn't feel that good after, we can't just keep adding compliments. Instead, let's reduce the negative by not saying things if we don't think that they'll actually result in a behavior change. Your job is to serve and return with your partner. So if they say, look at that pretty bird, and you don't respond, you're not doing your job. You either have to say, like, appreciate the bird, or tell them why now is not a great moment for you. Hey, I'm really stressed right now and I'm going to take some alone time. Okay. Guilt is common. Um, You don't, there's a great YouTuber who does stuff on these topics and said you don't have to feel hashtag blessed every day. I love that. Real feelings are valid. And a lot of this stuff benefits from therapy. And if you want to do it on your own because of time and money, the one to look at for guilt thoughts is CBT. It's all over the place. There's also some like apps and things where you can do it in an automated way if that's the only way that it's accessible to you. But I'm very pro human. Um, this can partly be a conscious choice, right? The guilt. So you can decide as a couple or a family unit to say no to guilt and shame. Um, and you're doing your best, accepting imperfection and just moving forward. You can help each other, holding um, each other to these kind of things. Oh, thank you for the question. CBT is cognitive behavioral therapy, and it helps us the behavior, it helps us do things that feel good and make us feel good. And the cognitive part is it helps us think thoughts that make us feel good. Um, so celebrate small wins. Okay, next. Um, okay, so we want to engage school supports early, especially if there's going to be accommodations needed. That will help us get into college and stuff. If we have a long documented accommodation record, then the standardized testing bodies will be more likely to accept it. 504 IEP meetings exploring what schools have. Use mental health resource crisis lines before a crisis happens. So your county has probably a mobile mental health team. You can call them and say, if I were to have a crisis, what would I do? And what happens if this happens? And what do I do if he runs away? And kind of plan it. Um, Join the community for your specific disorder. So it takes a lot of activation energy to kind of do that. Sign up for it, figure out when it is, figure out a good one. But once you do it, you're getting people who really relate to you. They're going to give you pro tips. They're going to give you an emotional sense of being seen. It's really worth your time. Okay. Don't let caregiving erase your identity. Whatever it was that made you you, keep doing that, even if it's just for a minute a month. And some of the things that we're talking about feel like a chore and they feel like I don't really want to do this. I'm already tired and this isn't even fun. Do it anyway. So for some of these things like physical activity and meditation, it's worth faking it till you make it and just doing it. And build these things into your social engagements. Okay, so meditation reduces stress reactivity, so we're going to be less irritable and more patient. It supports physical health in so many ways that I don't have time to mention right now. It enhances our clarity for decision making so we can let the things that we might have done, like let's say 10 things we might have gotten done really productively, but none of them actually had to get done. It lets those fall away and we see oh, here's the scary thing that I actually have to do today, but I'm just going to confront it. Um, it's accessible and adaptable, so you can do it how it works for you. Next slide. So start small. Consistency and duration are both valuable. So if you can manage to be consistent, even if it's 2 minutes a day, that's a great start. Use guided meditations on YouTube, and be persistent. It won't, even if you don't feel like you're good at it, you don't feel like you're doing it right, you don't feel like it's working. It's like with anything else, like weightlifting, right? You wouldn't expect results after the first day. Keep at it. The science is really there that it will help you in many ways. Exercise. So even 10 minutes a day can drastically improve your functioning, and build it into everything. So schedule tethering, like having it be the first thing that happens in the morning, walking paths when you're checking emails, They're like $100 on Amazon. Walk and talk with your friends on the phone or in person instead of just talking. Wiggle when you're standing around talking about something. And dance affords a social, silly way to, sometimes silly, way to sort of enjoy. And the next one, I have two examples. I'll start with the dance since we touched on it. There's a thing called ecstatic dance that's around in most cities, and they are very open-minded about who can come. Babies come, people bring special like construction earmuffs for them because it's a loud dance environment, and they're open to people with developmental disabilities and other disabilities coming, and they have them in most of the major cities in the U.S. Um, gratitude, gratitude run. So this is something that I do. I decided I want to have gratitude in the morning because it's been shown to be really helpful for brain function. And thank you. Yeah, I shall. Um, and so, like, trying to combine that into a physical activity, like, okay, I'm going to go on a 10-minute run and I'm going to do gratitude then, is a great way to sort of combine those things. Overcome the activation energy and just do it. You may find that even if you felt tired, you'll have more energy. Okay, so our body is supposed to get sunlight in the morning. Um, right then, we're supposed to kind of feel awake. The heat comes onto the land, our body temperature rises, and we're ready for the day. Later, the sun sets, the heat dissipates off the land. We're getting that red shifted light. We're getting a decrease in body temperature, and all these things are sending signals that it's time to sleep. So we want to simulate that with a cold room at night with low red shifted, and we want to keep bed for sleeping only so our brain doesn't get confused and think that it's email time. A great way to combine some of these is to take night walks. They're exercise, they can be meaningful processing time. And by taking a walk at night, there's less light out than there would be inside a room. And so we're just naturally sending that bedtime signal to our brain. Okay. Caring for your child means caring for yourself. Your child will notice if you're not caring for yourself and things will be worse. Burnout is not a failure, it's just a signal. And find something from the presentation I gave and put it into action today. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much to both of our speakers. That was a fantastic talk. We're gonna jump into the Q&A, and I guess to leave off on a note, um, you can absolutely, if you continue to have questions, send them to the Bridge Lab email. I'll drop it into the chat in a minute. If you guys are interested in participating, we currently have a virtual study on Zoom, and we have two other studies for Noonan syndrome and neurofibromatosis 1. And I can send these flyers along as well. And again, most of you here, many of you here, are from various Facebook groups and support communities, such as the NF1 Foundation, the Rosopathies Network. We want to say thank you to all of those and also to all of you for supporting each other so well. There's a lot of other Facebook communities out there. Some of the larger ones that we are in touch with are the ones listed here, if those are of any interest to any of you. But there's also a lot of local organizations. We can't list them all, but there's plenty for different states, for different cities, and a lot of those can provide a lot of better resources. And again, thank you to all the Bridge Lab Fund sponsors. And again, thank you so much to everyone who joined today. It was a really, really great webinar, and it was great to have everyone here. And I'll drop the Bridge Lab email in the chat in a second. Yeah.
I already did, Aneta, and
Oh, beautiful. Thank you.
want to thank Dr. Phil and Dr. Allen for joining us today. I think it was so informative, and would love to hear everyone's feedback. So please kind of like feel free to give us some feedback about more topics. Maybe we'll need to call them again.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you everyone. Again, email us at any point with questions or if you have any like ideas or things you want to see in a future webinar. And thank you again to the Alan, Phil, and to everyone who showed up. So